Good evening, everyone, and thank you for listening to the Futurati Podcast, where we dive into how emerging technologies will impact the world and your bank account. I'm Trent Fowler, and joining me, as always, is my co-host, Thomas Fry. Thomas and I are futurists, keynote speakers, and consultants with decades of experience in analyzing trends and communicating new developments to audiences across the world. Reach out to us at futuratipodcast.com/contact-futurati if you'd like to hire us for consulting, to speak at your event, or to advertise on our podcast. Thomas, we just wrapped up a fascinating interview with Suman Kanuganti, who is the CEO and co-founder at Personal.ai, where they are building I don't know if it's right to call it the opposite of ChatGPT, but they're not building this gigantic language model that's meant to be fully general and able to answer a wide variety of different questions. It's trained specifically on data that you generate, and it learns more about you over time and is better able to approximate the way you would think or act in a given situation as you feed it more data. So how did you feel about the interview? I know this is something you've been talking about for years. For as long as I've known you, you've been talking about digital twins and twin bots and having some way of farming out answering boilerplate emails to some sort of algorithm. So this is the realization of something you've been thinking about for quite some time. You must have some reactions.
Yeah, this is your personal AI. This is your buddy bot that you confide in. I mean, you start talking to it when you're a young kid, and it becomes your best friend in high school and college, and lives with you all the way into the retirement home when you're ready to die. So this is your entire body of knowledge that you obtain your entire all through your life, and that I think is absolutely a fascinating concept. But the downside of it is that nobody has actually created any technology that lasts more than a couple decades in the tech world. So I'm not sure how this stands up over time.
Well, we'll have to see about that, but I do find the first part of your vision very compelling. So as Suman noted in the interview, it learns more over time. Like the more data you feed it, obviously, the better the model gets. And so I'm thinking, if I started interacting with it today, feeding in notes I take on books, transcripts to this podcast, my answers to questions, interviews I've done, maybe after a while, I could feed it a book and just have it generate notes that I might take or things that I might find interesting, have it draw my attention to this or that. I think that the possibilities are really, really compelling, and it remains to be seen whether or not they've cracked this nut. But if they have, I think there are all sorts of applications. It's a little bit morbid, but as he was talking, I was thinking about some of the early applications people built with chatbots 8 or 10 years ago, where they would train it on the emails or the letters of a loved one that had passed away. And it was almost like they could interact with this facsimile of a departed father or, spouse or something like that. It would be really interesting to leave something like that behind that my children could interact with, hopefully far in the future. But, if I were diagnosed with terminal cancer today, it's comforting knowing that I might be able to leave an artifact behind that would be able to talk to them or provide guidance in a manner pretty similar to what I would do alive.
Yeah, this seems like a model that's going to be hungry for more data all the time, and it might be an incentive to a lot of people to start consuming more information, to surrounding themselves with more information, and then it becomes real fascinating as to what all you can do with it. The idea of leaving your legacy on your chatbot, something that can be resurrected or can be recalled, and you can just download it and start, your great-great-great-grandchildren can just start talking to you 150 years from now. That'd be kind of cool.
A dad bot.
A dad bot, yeah.
So Thomas and I are enchanted by the possibilities, and hopefully you will be as well. So without further ado, this is episode 129 with Suman Kanuganti. Tonight, we're joined by Suman Kanuganti. Suman is the co-founder and CEO at Personal.ai, a company that is reinventing human-to-human messaging by leveraging AI that helps people collaborate, exchange ideas, and deepen their relationships with others. As a creator and entrepreneur, Suman is passionate about solving problems for humans by leveraging the power of blockchain, robotics, AI, AR, wearable tech, video streaming, and fintech. If you enjoy this interview, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends. And don't forget to check out our website, futurepodcast.com.
Okay, we're rolling.
Suman, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Trent. How are you?
Doing just fine, actually. Is the weather nice in San Diego?
No, actually, it's kind of gloomy today, but I still like it when it is cloudy in San Diego because we do get a lot of sun, so I enjoy it when it is not sunny.
It's got to be one of the only times I've ever asked anyone that question. They're like, not really, no. Let's hear a little bit about your background, your interests, and what brought you to working on Personal.ai.
My background, I'm an engineer, but I usually try to introduce myself by saying I'm like super passionate about solving hard problems that are close to human beings. I always have this mantra of like, don't solve the human, solve the problem. What do I mean by that? It's almost always consumer experiences, consumer problems that I'm most passionate about. In my previous company, I built something called IRA, AIRA. That's about like, using technology for filling the gap of missing visual information for people who are blind and low vision. And in this company, it's about using technology to kind of augment cognition and people's time by using AI. So that's generally the premise of, who I am, what I am. By background, I have a robotics major. I'm an electrical engineer. I did a lot of software development as well, systems engineering as well. And then slowly, picked up this passion of creating, products and solve problems and create some beautiful experiences along the way. So I got my MBA and then, jumped into the startup world, and this is my second company.
Fantastic. I love that kind of background. Hard tech and then business savvy as well. It's really a potent combination. I'm interested in your interest in augmenting human cognition. So we've got all these generative algorithms now that are able to output text and videos, and people are only just beginning to explore the possibilities of these technologies. I'm sort of curious as to your vision of augmenting human cognition, because when I think that, I think something that's actually making the algorithms running in my brain better. I think that ChatGPT and some of the tools that are available today are a very weak version of that, but I foresee the possibilities for much stronger versions later on down the line. How do you think about that, augmenting human cognition? What do you mean when you use that phrase?
Yeah. So, the whole concept of the AI, I think most generally we are all familiar with like AI thinking about as like a thing, is a separate thing or an entity by itself. From our perspective, we think about technology almost as like a foundation, and it's an extension of who you are. So from a purely large language model versus personal language model, right? So when you do give the examples of ChatGPT, from my perspective, it's essentially speeding up our synthesis of what world's information has to offer to us. Such as Google, right? Like, Google gave us search engine, so if we can find the right information and all these different pieces, but put all the pieces together for ourselves and synthesize them and then try to come up with some sort of an output from it. And the large language models basically indexed all the internet that exists out there and gave us a tool to make that thing faster, make that synthesis of information smoother and get to the answers, more on point. The role of personal AI is not about words information. And the role of personal AI is about information that is possessed in one individual by their thoughts, by their expression, by their voice, by their knowledge. So it is not a large language model. It's actually a personal language model, which is an implementation or a creation of the AI models that is pretty much works very good at small data sets, and we have designed it in such a way that it replicates, it tries to be you and how you talk, how you express your thoughts and your knowledge and everything you.
So could I outsource my whole life to it?
You could think about like imagining a future where you could outsource at least some aspect of your life to it. For example, let's say you have a piece of knowledge that you probably are not working on a day-to-day basis every day. You could think about outsourcing that, knowledge of yours for people to communicate with you, so that way that you can still benefit from it. So I think there are number of different ways to think about it, right? Like, we start learning like at the age of 5, and we gather all these experiences, we consume a lot of information, we create a lot of things, and along the way we are doing things in the moment. But we also kind of forget like 80% of it. And whenever we think about, recalling information or making a decision, you are not necessarily relying on your entirety of your own mind. That's like one piece of the puzzle. Second piece of puzzle is the people that you add value to on your day-to-day basis, the people around you, they probably do not have access to you all the time, 24/7, to the point where they can have meaningful conversations, ask questions, like still gain the value, that you can offer. So the genesis of this company like goes with this core idea of how can we create a model that represents who you are to the fullest extent of what you are made of and benefit in everyday communication and everyday lives. So it's kind of the thesis, around personal AI.
I have a couple of follow-ups to that. I thought we would start at kind of a technical level, though. So, we've already started talking about GPT. GPT-4 was just released today. I'm sort of curious about the technology that undergirds Personal.ai, because on the website it specifically says you're not using any of the ChatGPT or large language model offerings that are out there today. So obviously you can't divulge too many technical specifics, but I'm a machine learning engineer myself. And so I'm just sort of curious about whatever you can divulge with regards to its architecture or the training data, how it was built, just anything you can talk about.
Yeah, not sure. Like technology is always fun. So the company, we've been in existence for 3 years, and the technology we built is called personal language model. Fancy enough, we also call our transformers generative grounded transformer. So it is still based on like transformer architecture. In fact, it is also based on like GPT architecture, but our implementation was very specific to small amounts of data. So we can train this data, which takes like less than 7 minutes. It's a combination of conversational as well as generative model that is entirely trained on your data. Now, you asked about the data as well, like how do we do that? So what we have designed is we basically, picked some of the inspiration from like how neuroscience talks about how people like gather data and how this core idea of the memory is created in your minds, right? So we created this concept of like memory stack, which is, it takes all the unstructured data in your life for the past historical data as well as ongoing basis, and it goes through a series of transformers to create what we call this memory blocks. A memory block is nothing but a unit of data that can be multimodal, a text, an image, biometrics, location, people, time, and it composes these memory blocks over a time period. So if you think about like the idea of the memory stack is nothing but this collection of memory blocks over a period of time, it obviously grows depending on what sort of inputs that you are connecting to your personal AI for it to process automatically every time.
So let me ask you a question there. I've been speculating that people are going to be wearing smart glasses in the future, and you're going to be able to record everything that you see and everything that you hear, everything that you read, all the audio you come into contact with, as well as other sensor data that your glasses can pick up. Is that the kind of data set that you're talking about?
Yeah, the premise is that the system is designed for modalities even into the future, including glasses. Okay. I can send you some cool like white papers and patterns, if you want to dig deeper into tech. But we envision a future, like our immediate future, where you have your glasses, you go walk around the restaurant, your personal AI immediately pops up and says, you've been at this restaurant so-and-so date, and this is what you had. If you would want to, recall that piece of information. So that's the kind of world that we envision. And these personal AIs are so much learning you and everything about you, not just the preferences as such, but the knowledge, but where you're big and how you talk about it, what are your opinions, etc.
Hello, this is Trent Fowler, co-host of the Futurati podcast. One of the most common pieces of marketing advice I've come across is to know your audience and give them what they want. One difficulty in podcasting is that it's actually pretty hard to do this. None of the major platforms give us any way to reach out to you, our listeners, to find out what you enjoy about the Future Audio Podcast and what you'd like to see done differently. So we've decided to record this commercial and ask you directly to reach out to us. Head over to futureaudiopodcast.com, go to the contact page, and drop us a line. Tell us about your favorite and least favorite episodes, what you'd like to see us cover in the future, and anything else you want us to know. We produce this show for you, and we want your advice so we can make it even better. Thank you.
So it occurred to me that the primary skill, the most useful skill in history, has always been a good memory. If you have a good memory, then you're a very valuable person, and you can be used for all kinds of different roles and different jobs. And as we move into this AI era, we're far less dependent on our memory. That we can adapt and have other access to our memories through other means, but then it brings up lots of real interesting questions around what skills are going to be useful in the future, and what things are colleges going to be doing in the future to justify their existence.
Well, especially given, did you see that GPT-4, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep making the conversation about on other companies' technology, but it scored in the 90th percentile for the LSAT and did even better on a couple of other metrics. So it's not even clear what those tests will be used for anymore.
Yeah, and by the way, don't worry about ChatGPT because I use that examples as well. Everybody understands it, and it's a good general awareness around the company anywhere. So that's all good in terms of AI moving forward. So this goes back from like technology to philosophical, right? So here is my take, and we probably talked about this quite a bit, and a lot of people do ask me about similar things. Look, at the end of the day, from my perspective, technology is always going to be a foundation. Like, human beings are so smart, whatever technology is thrown at us, we will only be building on top of it. So either it be a simple calculator, a Google Maps, or search engine, or now AI, we will evolve into combining all those pieces of things into technology as a foundation, and then we will be building on top of it. So if indeed we are having access to kind of fullest extent of how we access our memory, well, that means that we probably are making decisions differently. That means probably we will be doing greater and bigger things that are helpful to us in a different way. So I don't think anything would be replaced. I think the general intention is there's always a transition in the macro world, right? Whenever there's a piece of technology that exists, that comes in, yes, some jobs will be lost, but that doesn't happen overnight. It happens slowly, and then we humans will adapt. Now, the people who doesn't adapt, that's like small percent of the people. Yes, people will be like, I do not want to adapt. I do not want to use calculators. I do not want to use Google Maps. Eventually, we'll turn that off, because guess what? When 99% of the people will use calculators, and that's the norm, because now we can do better mathematics. Now we can invent better scientific methods. It's the same foundation is, from my perspective, is it be calculator or fancy technology like AI?
So you're not at all worried about technological unemployment, anything like that?
There will be a shift. There will be downside. There will be upsides. Very similar to our markets. But it will eventually not be a problem. It will eventually be moving economy from like one place that existed concentrated, and it will shift, but that shift always happens over time. And that could be, 2 decades before, now it could be a decade, and in the future it could be few years and then even months.
So Trent, the way I've been thinking about that is that this technology makes us exponentially more capable. So the amount that we can accomplish in a lifetime goes up by 10x or maybe 100x or even maybe 1,000x. And so it's not about losing jobs. It's about taking on bigger projects, and not just mega projects anymore, massive super giga projects or whatever they might be.
Hyper mega ultra projects. No, I think there's a lot to that. So we have been kicking this idea around for a few episodes now. We did one a couple weeks ago specifically on this. Is ChatGPT going to take all the jobs? And no, our thesis is broadly no, that it will not. I think we agree with you that there will be a shift and that it will probably happen over time. It's a little harder to say what the dynamics will be if you're talking about a recursively self-improving intelligence, something that's human level and they get superhuman level. Like that becomes very hard to model out. But we're not dealing with anything like that. Personal AI is not building anything like that. Open AI is not building anything like that. And so I think that we will have time to adjust. And I think that you're right. We will shift our production to different verticals and places where we have a comparative advantage. And, our argument in the episode I just referenced, episode 123, was that more and more human work will shift to last mile production or last mile thinking or last mile development, where the AI will generate quite a lot of what you need to put up a web page, build an app, or design a quantum computing circuit or what have you. File a lawsuit. I saw one today where you can do one-click lawsuits now for robocalls. You can just put it right in and it records the phone call and makes a transcript out of it. In one click, you got a lawsuit for $1,500 because they can't just spam you like that. So more and more human effort will go to fitting it into the greater edifice of technology, dealing with boundary cases, and otherwise integrating it with existing systems. So I think we will just do more stuff out onto the long tails. But, as I said in that episode, the thing about long tails is that they're really long. There's just a lot of stuff to do. And I'm not super worried about us running out of problems to solve anytime soon.
Yeah, I think in fact, we'll probably be worrying about a different set of problems that we cannot comprehend like right now. We probably do not know about those problems at all. But in the future, it'll become, oh my God, this is such a huge problem. It's like, oh my God, like searching on this piece of information and synthesizing is like a huge problem better. Like before Google search, like just having the access to information was such a huge deal, right? Yeah, so I think it's just the mindset and how we think about it. Yes, there is short-term problems around like potentially jobs changing or shrinking and moving, but eventually people will adapt, humans will adapt, and the jobs will change. And, some people will go through some pain, but overall, it will only lead to the positive outcomes because that's what we do. Like we are selfish human beings. We'll always be building other things that on top of what is given to us.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit more about personal AI, and I don't mean this is somewhat of an abrupt shift, but I wanted to ask you before, given that your model is targeted specifically at small data sets, what engineering challenges has that given rise to? Because these neural networks, these transformer architectures are famously data hungry. You need huge amounts of data in order to train them. So I know that you've arrived at memory blocks in this unique architecture for dealing with that, but what does it look like to train on sparse data sets? I just don't generate that much data. It's certainly not enough to train like a big model.
Yeah, it's definitely like a challenging problem. Like even the early days of 2020, I remember, and the brains behind, this personal language models is my CTO. She's Sharon Zhang. She's a MIT graduate and she created like 4 different companies, including like nuance algorithms, original NLP algorithms. So the most interesting thing about like personal data is the idea of like being grounded into the data itself. Especially like with generative algorithms, you do have a tendency of getting carried away where the bias of the data is. And one of the misconceptions that I learned from Sharon is large language model, large data sets doesn't necessarily mean better AI. What does it mean? It means that personal language model, if you think about the data set of a personal language model, you have a specific corpus, data corpus trend, and that may be slightly different or not different from Thomas as well. And I'm sure that it must be different from mine. We probably have like few common themes around AI, podcasts, talking about the future, etc. But who you are as an individual person is unique. So when the intent of a request or a prompt, if you will, to the AI falls within the data corpus of what you actually possess, then we can construct meaningfully better AI response. However, if you are expecting a personal language model to function more like a large language model where you throw any prompt at it, talking about any different topics that probably does not exist in one individual data corpus, then I'm like, I don't know, like I don't have that particular data. And that's the reason why large language model makes it better for those use cases. So it's not necessarily the large amounts of data set is associated with better AI. The large amount of data set is associated with broader sets of use cases. So in our personal language model, we have to figure out what exactly is the thresholds, if you will, for identifying where does the grounded nature kind of tips over to be like more general in nature, and how do we contain that within the data sphere to construct a response. So we still have to back up like these personal language models with like foundational language models. So that way there is no confusion around how do you construct a response. If all you know is like one memory, right? You still need to understand, you need to have an understanding of the language, like very similar to how we learn as kids. So there are like some foundational general models, if you will, that backs up this personal language model. But the language model for the personal language model itself is crunched within your own data, and for it to construct the data, it will use the foundational language models. So there is like some algorithmic, I think, beauty that is associated with making this happen.
Are you enjoying this episode of the Futurati podcast? If so, please like it, give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and share it with your friends. By far, the best way to help us grow is to spread the word on social media, which will expose our content to more people and help us continue to bring you interviews with world-leading experts in AI, quantum computing, cryptocurrencies, and so much more. Thank you in advance.
So you said it was multimodal, right? So are you stitching together a couple of different like ImageNet models or ULMO or what have
Yeah, so the
pre-trained language models?
Yeah, the input data structure, which is the memory stack and memory block, and by the way, it's open. I can send it to you. It is multimodal. Although right now the immediate use cases is very much focused on messaging and communicating back and forth with people. So that way you could, automatically draft responses in the Copilot, and other people can talk to you, automatically in the autopilot mode. But however, we do have if you think about like events, right? When am I coming back from a specific place to specific place? Those are only event-driven data. It still can be interpreted with language. So everything that can be interpreted with language, we are doing it right now. In the future, we will be able to figure out the use cases. Like let's say, for example, you send me a text message like, Suman, what's going on? How are you feeling? And how it's going with Personal AI? Based on the calculation of all my data and memory, there could be possibilities of using AI-generated images for me to form a response. It's like very similar to how you would, respond with a Giphy, like, to express your emotion today, right? Or you would express with an emoji or a Giphy. So we kind of incorporated that within the product where you can like type in a prompt, like personally, and you can generate a prompt within your personal data and then still use like Stable Diffusion or Tane to generate the image to express, that feeling. But over time, that multimodal nature of how we live should be converging to an integrated experience with the AI language plus visuals. Does it make sense?
Yeah. And that you preempted another question I was going to ask about integrating with some of these other more general language models. So I could imagine a tech stack where Personal AI is trained on my messages and can handle certain functionalities. Maybe I've got an instance of ChatGPT, which is trained specifically on some of my data for outputting more technical reports, something like that. DALL-E for synthesizing this or that. You can imagine a sort of futuristic workflow coming out of that, where a lot of your output is actually generated by AI, and what you're doing is curating it or tweaking it or interacting with it in some way.
I think about it as a personal cloud. You're kind of creating a personal cloud of information. Is this in any way protected from the outside so that you have control over it, so it doesn't get kind of hijacked by the big tech companies?
Okay, so that's the third principle for Personal AI. which is exactly what you said. So, I mean, even if you go back to the fundamentals, right, it's this core idea of like memories, right? Like how do you create a digital memory one in the memory stack and then, crunch a model of or algorithm off of it. So I mean, I get a little bit more about my background, but you heard about the idea of creating experiences that are trustworthy, right? And previously it was blind people, like establishing trust with, like, them communicating with a human agent who is far away to be able to, rely on that information anyway. So the fundamental principle for the memories is that it is private, so we got to respect it. And it is personal, we got to respect that as well. So the core memory stack thesis is that you own the data. Every consumer wants their own data. And in fact, this is a way to even think about converging your life where most of the data pieces is probably fragmented in multiple different platforms to pull it together and create your memory stack that is yours forever. And we indeed went a step extra to use blockchain to protect their ownership and guarantee the privacy of the data for that individual. And this happened in 2020, and there were a lot of challenges with it, convincing people that this is the right way to do. But going back to the thesis of, you start with the problem. The problem is, hey, what about ownership? What about privacy? What are the technologies that are available? There are like a whole bunch of technologies that you can use. But how do we remove ourselves out of the equation? How do we give full control of this data, of this AI to the people, to the point where even if somebody is putting a gun on my head, I cannot do shit, right? And that is the level of commitment you need to have for building customer AI.
So is it possible to use an assessment bot on your personal AI to assess how much you've learned over a period of time? And then I always talk about this idea of granting microcredits, where 100 microcredits equals 1 college credit. And so I ask this question a lot of, if you read 1,000 books, is that the equivalent of a college degree? Or if you watch 1,000 movies, is that the equivalent? Or listen to 2,000 hours of podcasts, is that the equivalent? The right answer is it depends on the movies, the books, and the podcasts. But my speculation is that in the future, we're going to have an assessment bot that can do this assessment on what you've learned and then assign some value on an equivalency scale. This is the equivalent of a master's degree or PhD or 10 levels above a PhD. Is that something that you have in your thinking or your planning?
That's an interesting question. What we have is the following. So we were talking about this concept of like memory blocks, right? Definitely the size of your stack will determine the breadth and the broadness and the depthness of the quality of your AI, or how grounded it is into your thinking. So far, what we have identified is if it is like north of 1,000 memory blocks, which is equivalent to around 500 pages of like your thoughts, your opinions, your content, then the scores generally falls within the corpus of you, along with the stylistic component, meaning how you write will start to be influenced more from your style. So I think what you're asking is interesting. I haven't done any tests, but it may be a worthwhile question to kind of figure out how does the size, breadth, and the depth of a stack would potentially influence the assessment. So I think that'll be an interesting test.
Yeah, so sort of in keeping with that, what are the major use cases you see now and in the future? So we've mentioned messaging, and that seems like good low-hanging fruit. But if we were going to scope out the roadmap over the next 5 years, it could plausibly include a question asking system that asks you questions in the same style that you ask them and helps you to assess your comprehension on a book that you've read or a podcast you've listened to, and you could see that sort of spinning up into a bespoke tutor that's trained specifically on your interest and style. So what do you plan on building with this? Well, so what's the functionality you want to build into the platform, and how do you see people using it in the future?
Yeah. So as of today, Personal AI is a chat application or messaging application. What does it mean? It basically means like today we communicate, back and forth on WhatsApp, on Slack, on Discord, and iMessage to multiple different people. And sometimes we are also used to like messaging ourselves, right? It's like, oh, I want to remember this. I want to probably get back to it. So I will message it to myself because it's an important piece of information. Personal AI application, whenever this airs, you can technically download from App Store or a desktop application, and it will function like a chat application. You can bring in Thomas and chat with him. Now, here is the interesting part. Whatever message that you send to yourself, which is to your AI, will be trained, and that message could be a piece of text, a full-blown article that you wrote, a URL, a video, a document, all the things that probably like revolve around you and the be exchange. And not only that, like any message that you send to Thomas, to Suman, to other people will also be trained. The value is whenever you are getting like any incoming message from anybody else or to yourself, to your AI, it would draft a response. So let's say, you do like many podcasts and you talk to different people, you probably have multiple different content. If you indeed like message all those things to your AI, it will be trained on. And when Suman asks to trend, is like, what was the episode 130 that you were talking about? Can you link me like specific points in there? Then your AI will be able to respond. So think about like the prompts that we are normally used to with ChatGPT. Any different kinds of prompts will function exactly the same way with your personal AI as well, except that it is first grounded within your own data. And it tries to construct a response like, from you. So if I ask you a question, simple question like, hey, what do you think about like blockchain in the AI space? If it can indeed construct a response from your mind, because in your stack, in your model, then it does. But I can also do say like, hey, Trent, give me a tweet with some inspirational quote about blockchain in the AI from your own thoughts. Then it will do that as well, right? But we incorporate this in the messaging application because there is a immediate understanding of the need before you even start getting into, oh shit, like what are all the data that I need to train on? Start communicating, start talking to people. And anything that you send to yourself, anything to send to other people, it will be trained on. You will never lose a moment. Everything is learned and nothing is forgotten, right? So those are all the things that will come out.
I really like the idea of being able to talk to the podcast, the Future Edit podcast. 129 episodes in, all this content, just being able to feed it the transcripts and ask it questions of that resulting body of knowledge is very compelling. It's actually something I've been thinking about doing with ChatGPT or OpenAI's API, but this sounds like a plausible alternative to that.
Yeah, so there are like good number of applications that is built on like top of ChatGPT for like specific data sets, right? Like the podcast and specific domains, and you just gave an example of a lawsuit, legal. I mean, there are like all these different use cases where you have a large group of data, you can aggregate the data and then give it to ChatGPT, and then you can fine tune a model. It's great. There are like two considerations that you have to think about it. One, you are submitting the data to a large language model. That means eventually that large language model will be indexing your data. And when the next version of the large language model comes in, it will be trained on the data as well. So they have to like figure out like what kind of technology that people are building to set these boundaries within a particular thing. And even then, it is still like a bigger domain specific data set that you are probably building or fine-tuning out of ChatGPT. Where we focus on is on pushing really the people to have this data specific to an individual, because it could be like so small. The contrast is 120 billion parameters is our model compared to 170 billion parameters, right? So if you just add 120 billion to 170 billion, the mathematics tells it's 170 billion, right? So it's like pure, you can never get the personalization that we are talking about with a 140 billion parameter by snapping it on top of 170 billion. So that's basically like how these models are kind of set up. So I think it just simply depends on what exactly is your use case. And I feel based on the macro stuff that is happening out there, ChatGPT, Google language models, large language models will solve the purposes of indexing the internet, where a bunch of different use cases will be unlocked equally for all the people. Meaning if I use a prompt, it is the same output or similar output at least. And it will be much more acceptable and widely used within the corporate setting where the data could be closed and the model is closed and, you and me doesn't have access to Google's data for that matter. So great. Our focus is consumers. Everybody should own the individual person's data, very similar to how organizations own it, and give them a mechanism that these models will work in their favor, that they own, that they can build over a period of time throughout the lifetime. So it's like a opposite of OpenAI, personal AI.
No, that's
The concepts are the same. The concepts are the same. The use cases are defined in the approach.
Do you need a dynamic and knowledgeable speaker for an event? Thomas Fry and me, Trent Fowler, are both seasoned keynote speakers, able to converse on a wide array of topics to audiences of all sizes and skill levels. Go to the contact page at futuraudiopodcast.com to book Thomas or myself today, and let us apply our years of experience in public speaking to make your event a smashing success.
So is personal AI available today, and how much does it cost?
Good question. When is it getting aired, by the way?
12 minutes from now?
No, a couple of weeks, maybe a month, maybe a little over that. It's not too, yeah.
So the reason I guess we reached out is it's time for us to go to the market. Now, so we've been building this for the past 3 years, believe it or not. But the good news is I think all things are coming together now, specifically at awareness around the AI and what it can actually do. So last year we did like a whole different set of experimentations, trying to find the use cases, content generation, messaging applications, influencers, like the makeup of the company. But where we are today is we are at a point we have released or releasing, depending on when people hear to this, a personal AI application that is free to download, free to use. And when you create a personal AI account, you will get your personal AI for free. Humans to human can communicate very similar to how you would communicate on your WhatsApp. Individual DMs, private messages, you can create groups, you can create business accounts, etc., etc., etc. However, everything that you exchange from within your own personal AI will now be working in your favor to create your own model and start having your AI generate the responses, create those magical things. It's like, I don't have to type this. And if you like it, you simply swipe right to send it. And as the number of AI interactions, AI messages, AI use increases, then we have the subscription model. It will be a monthly subscription model that people would choose to pay. And that would be associated with, X number of messages for communities, for organizations, for small businesses, for customers and clients, for, heavy needs and heavy use cases. Yes, there will be a paywall and subscription, but at the baseline, everybody can build their own AI. Everybody can communicate. Everybody will have a baseline of creating some value within their lives.
I love that. Where can we send people to learn more about your company and your offering? Personal. If you're listening and not watching the video, he pointed to the sign behind him, which says Personal.ai.
Yep, that's right. And everybody will have their own personal brand page as well. So you can technically publish trend.personal.ai. People can go in there, learn about you. Simply click on message that will send them a text link or a QR code, etc., to directly start talking to you. And you can choose to, if Suman is coming in, it's like, I don't know Suman, like you can choose to set him in a co-pilot mode where your AI is not automatically responding because I don't trust this person. But your AI will be augmenting you, extending your thoughts. If you say hello, it's like, hey, I met so-and-so did. And like, if your AI has that piece of information, then it makes like, yeah, I had a good conversation with you. How's it going, buddy? And then over a period of time, depending on whom you're talking to and what group it is in, you can choose to set your AI in the autopilot. But that I think is like an evolution. It's not a service where you come in and you get a task done and you leave. This is a investment and it gets smarter and smarter and smarter. This is a digital asset of you that will grow, with people's life, right? So that's kind of how we think about it.
Well, I think it's really cool. I'm really excited to outsourcing all my fights and all the tedious stuff that I don't want to do to this algorithm. So appreciate it. It's a really exciting thing you're building, and it was a lot of fun talking to you today.
Yeah, likewise, John. It's always fun. And Thomas, thanks a lot for thoughtful questions.
Yeah, thanks, Suman. This is great.